Hi guys, this video is about lifting weights during pregnancy, and I'm going to split this into two parts. This part one, is going to be about women who prior to pregnancy are already doing some kind of weightlifting regime. So if maybe you were lifting weights before getting pregnant, and you would consider yourself a kind of intermediate or advanced lifter, and you know what you're doing, you know what weights you're lifting, then this part of the kind of discussion is for you. And part two is going to be about starting a beginner's weightlifting program during pregnancy, and that will be a separate video. So if you've never lifted weights before and you want to during pregnancy, you'll want to check that second part of this out. So I want to talk about women who are already lifting weights. Maybe you're lifting weights now, you've been lifting weights for some time, and you want to get pregnant, and you're worried about, can I lift weights during pregnancy? Can I continue to do that? And how can I do it safely? So that's what this video is about. I also want to cover some different types of weightlifting activities. So for example, some women might be power lifters and lifting very heavy weights in a rep range of 1 to 5. And that might look quite different from someone who's a bodybuilder and who's lifting in a higher rep range, 8 reps and 8 to 12, 8 to 15, maybe more reps, and how that might change. And then thirdly, I guess the other major group would be CrossFitters, who probably doing something somewhere in between the two, or a mixture of the two, and then they've also got the high intensity work that they might want to think about as well. That might be a separate issue. So first of all, is it possible to continue lifting weights during pregnancy? It absolutely is, and it's absolutely healthy to do so. It's absolutely safe to do so. However, there are slightly different considerations and slightly different guidelines during pregnancy that you might not think about so much. They still are relevant. Most women don't know about them. They still are relevant prior to pregnancy, but they may not, but they probably aren't as important. First of all, the major concern about weightlifting, and you've probably heard so much about weightlifting, and if you're like me, I was lifting pretty heavy weights before getting pregnant, and everyone that I knew was like, what are you going to do now? You can't lift weights anymore. And every app that I have for like pregnancy gives me some really random guidelines about lifting weights in terms of just on a day-to-day basis. I've read one that said don't lift any more than 11 kilos regularly. It could lead to miscarriage, which is a complete myth, and we'll talk about why. And one even said don't lift more than 3 kilos, or I think it was 3 pounds, which is just like a totally ridiculous amount of weight. I mean, I train heavily pregnant women who have 5-year-olds who weigh 25 kilos and they pick them up all the time. Like, both of those guidelines are not only completely arbitrary, and but they're also useless. I mean, they're impossible for most women to do anything about. The major thing that I want to get across is that weight and what is heavy is a very, very relative term. We can't say, 20 kilos is heavy, or 10 kilos is heavy, or 50 kilos is heavy, because it will depend so much on the person lifting. At my strongest, and I was never, I'm one of those people who's like kind of in between. I was never a particularly successful power lifter, so all the powerlifting women that I was around always looked at me and sort of said like, oh, you should be able to lift more for your size. But then the normal population thought I was insane. I was lifting my body weight, which is 65 kilo. I was back squatting my body weight. I was back squatting my body weight, which is 65 kilos for 5 reps. And that was at my absolute strongest, which is a decent weight, but I was not competitive at all. And my point is that for some women, most of my friends and family looked at me and went, you're crazy, that's such an insane amount of weight, that can't be healthy, that's just that it's so much, and that weight would literally crush them. And I train women who come in who are beginners to weight training, and some of them struggle to just do air squats, so a whole person's body weight would literally crush them. But I squatted in a gym with men who were back squatting over like 150 kilos, and in the world, you know, there are men who squat over 300 kilos. I mean, so 65 is a warm-up weight for them. It's a joke. It's something they can like throw overhead. So it's extreme, and I know that's talking about men, but it's extremely relative to the person. So if you're a power lifter and you're squatting, I don't know, back squatting like 80 kilos, 100 kilos, during pregnancy, it's going to be safe for you to back squat way more kilos, way more weight than someone like me. And if you are, and it's going to be safe for you to squat a lot more weight than somebody who is a bodybuilder and just back squats, 30 kilos for like 15 reps, or maybe for less, whatever, like the point, or who maybe just goblet squats, or who never squats, because you will have had that training. Your nervous system and your muscles will be trained to do that. The major thing though, that the biggest guideline that is given to women who lift weights and during pregnancy, and this is a fairly new topic. Girls Gone Strong in their certification program, they touch on this. Jessie Mundell touches on this, and I imagine that Brianna Battles from Everyday Battles will also talk about this to quite some extent, although I haven't done her course. But not many people are talking about guidelines for lifting real weights. I mean, I have books that say you should do some strength training, and they show pictures of women doing, 1 kilo presses or squats or whatever. And, it's not real strength training. So what are the actual guidelines for women who want to continue to lift weights? Now, the picture does look a little bit different from when you get pregnant. And the biggest guideline that we give to women, that we feel that the community of kind of strength training, people who also understand pregnancy, is and I have to say, like I said, this is a very new topic. This is quite a new thing to be doing, and I'm sure the guidelines will change over the years, but for now this is the best that we have. I know there's a woman as well called Forner in Australia who's currently doing a PhD on weightlifting and women's health, so hopefully they'll look more into the musculoskeletal concerns in terms of pelvic floor and things like that, and we'll have more answers to that in the coming years. But for right now, the guidelines are this: whatever rep range you choose to squat in, or choose to lift weights in, whether you're in a strength, kind of a traditional strength rep range, although it's not recommended to go below 5 reps and do kind of 1 rep maxes. Even 5 reps is a little bit borderline. But whether you're in that lower rep range or you're in a higher rep range, the biggest guideline is to blow before you go, which comes from Julie Wiebe in the States. She's a pelvic floor physio, and it's become a mantra in this kind of field. To breathe out, to exhale on the exertion. And this is important. This is important for a number of reasons. Firstly, and I think most importantly, is to regulate intra-abdominal pressure. When we're taught to lift weights, almost across the board, especially in a powerlifting style setting, we're taught to take a big breath in, hold our breath, bear down, brace, and squat, deadlift, press, pull the weight, whatever. There's some debate about whether or not that's actually the best strategy, and there are Antony Lo in Australia talks a lot about this particular strategy and other breathing strategies for lifting. For lifting optimal amounts of weight. So a different breathing strategy, a different breathing pattern, and a different breath holding pattern for lifting maximal loads. All of these people that I've mentioned, by the way, I'll put them in the footnotes so that you can visit their websites and see their work, because if you're serious about lifting weights and lifting weights safely during pregnancy, you want to check these people out. But anyway, that's a whole other topic that I'm not going to go into, just to touch on it. So the major guideline is to blow before you go, to release air through the exertion, and this is to regulate intra-abdominal pressure, to set up the piston breath, which is another concept from Julie Wiebe, which means that there will be a recoil of the pelvic floor that will help support us in the lift. And the diaphragm will not be bearing down on the pelvic floor, plus the weight, plus everything else. So if you're a power lifter, if you're used to breath holding and bracing, this is going to be a really tough pill to swallow, and this tends to be the hardest group to convince to change their training program through pregnancy, because they want to lift heavy weights, because they've learned how to do it a different way, and because if you are currently lifting 1 to 5 rep maxes, breath holding, bracing, and all the rest of it, you will know that if I ask you to breathe out through the reps, you will lift probably 75% or less of what you're currently lifting, and that sucks. I know that sucks for a woman who is breathing, who's lifting heavy weights, and who that's part of her identity, that's part of her exercise regime. But you need to understand why that guideline is given. That guideline is given because we're worried that lifting heavy weights, especially in late pregnancy, is going to affect the health of your pelvic floor and could lead to pelvic floor dysfunction, like a hypertensive pelvic floor on one end of the spectrum, or a weakness in the pelvic floor that could lead to incontinence, urinary incontinence, fecal incontinence, or that could lead to problems like pelvic organ prolapse. If you think in late pregnancy, the belly is full of baby and organs, and all the organs are being pushed out the way. There's now a huge amount of pressure down on the pelvic floor. We add to that a 1 rep max. We hold our breath, increase intra-abdominal pressure even more. That we worry that could cause pelvic floor dysfunction. And in particular, I know I'm concerned about prolapse, but that might be a different story from different people in the field. It's extremely important for the health of, and we also worry that it could cause or worsen a diastasis recti, an abdominal separation. Now, this particular consideration of like the integrity of your core muscles, your abdominal muscles, and your pelvic floor may only come into play later in pregnancy. The other major reason that we don't breath hold is concerns that breath holding could stop blood flow to the uterus. Now, I find this a little bit a weird one. I'm not sure if I agree that breath holding for a matter of seconds would stop blood flow to the uterus, especially in somebody who's well trained and who's fit and healthy. But nonetheless, it is a concern that's talked about in the medical and physiotherapy world, or the pregnancy world. And it's not something that I have. It's just, I don't fully understand the mechanism, I think, because it doesn't make complete sense to me. But there may be reasons that I haven't fully understood. But in any case, I, as someone who was lifting weights before pregnancy, I choose to follow these guidelines of blow before you go, breathing out through the exertion, because for me it's not worth the risks. If you choose to breath hold or to lift extremely heavy weights through your pregnancy, definitely check out Antony Lo and his techniques for breathing. I would recommend doing his course. It's not. I wouldn't recommend that to do that, to lift extremely heavy weights. And I would recommend trying to adjust your training programs and understanding that pregnancy is a different time of life, and that if you take an untrained woman who's never lifted weights before and you get her doing a strength training program throughout her pregnancy, she will get stronger. But if you take a woman who's intermediate or advanced, she is going to lose strength throughout her pregnancy. That's really important to understand. And that sucks. It's hard to get our heads around, but it is important to have that shift in mindset that you want to keep you safe, you want to keep your baby safe as well. But with weightlifting, we're more concerned about the musculoskeletal damage, the pressure on your pelvic floor and on your abdominal muscles. And is it worth it? Is it worth it? I think it might be better to gradually reduce your weights throughout pregnancy, and then when you finish, when you have the baby, then you can, when you're ready to go, you can start a progressive overload again. You can start to build up to heavy weights again if that's what you choose to do. But it may not be the best way. I believe that training through pregnancy is about keeping yourself as healthy as you possibly can be. And it's absolutely important to lift weights during pregnancy because we want to have a strong back, strong glutes, strong legs. That will help us cope with the physical demands of pregnancy and then motherhood so much better. So it's something that I absolutely encourage women to continue to do during pregnancy, but keep in mind those implications. Also, a second guideline other than the blow before you go guideline is to always leave a couple of reps in the tank. So don't go to failure. So if you are squatting 5 reps, you want to pick a weight that allows you to feel like you could have done a couple more. We don't want to squat to failure, deadlift to failure, whatever else to failure during pregnancy. And the same is true if you're if you're lifting in a higher rep range, like 8 reps, 10 reps, 12 reps, whatever it is. Leave a couple in the tank and don't go to complete failure. Just a couple of things to kind of to round off this discussion, that those are the guidelines: blow before you go and to leave a couple in the tank, whatever your rep range is. But a couple of other things, just considerations that, especially if you haven't ever been pregnant before, that you might not be considering. First of all, the first trimester is usually really tough. It's really, really tough for women. Women feel sick, feel extremely tired, and a lot of women feel extremely weak. And I certainly experienced this through my first trimester. It's just suddenly I just could not lift the weights that I was used to lifting anymore, even before I knew I was pregnant and I was still doing what I was doing anyway. It just wasn't happening. And I guess it's a combination of the tiredness, but the muscles actually produce less force. And so you might find it very hard to maintain your current program anyway through that first trimester. I had a second point, but I can't remember what it was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll come back to it if I remember it. So just quickly moving from, I talked a lot about sort of powerlifting and the really heavy rep range. I want to touch on bodybuilding now because it's really the same principles, the same underlying principles apply, but a bodybuilder may already be doing some of the things that I'm saying. So quite often you'll see bodybuilders, doing their reps, whatever they're doing, whether it's a row or a squat or a lunge or an isolation exercise, and they tend to breathe out anyway, and most of them tend to go for that mind muscle connection and for that pump, for that burn, rather than trying to lift the heaviest thing that they can. And I actually think this is a really, really, really good way. And they're also aiming for hypertrophy as opposed to kind of just pure strength. And I think that this is actually a really ideal way of working through pregnancy, and that it might be good for powerlifters to kind of move towards this. They're using very moderate weights, they're going for a pump, they'll also be getting a cardiovascular response, and they won't be lifting weights that will put undue pressure on the abdominal and pelvic floor muscles, the core muscles, which includes other muscles as well. But and this can be a really great way of training during pregnancy, and it's the main way that I train at the moment. A full body, and I mean, you can mix it up any way that you want to. You can do your body splits. You can do full body exercises. You can do it in your set rest, or you can do supersets or trisets or circuits. It's very, very adaptable. And in terms of, if you're working in supersets or trisets or circuits, you're also going to get a cardiovascular response from the exercise that you're doing, so that then you can kill two birds with one stone. But it's extremely adaptable, and it's extremely healthy for you and your baby to be doing that. You're going to be able to stay strong, and if you're stronger, the weight of the belly in late pregnancy is going to be that much lighter for you. So that's going to make your life easier, and then dealing with the physical demands of motherhood likewise. Most women find that, especially in the postpartum period where they can't exercise, they tend to lose some muscle mass. So if you have maintained muscle mass throughout your pregnancy, I would say that would be a major goal of pregnancy fitness, is to maintain your muscle mass, if not build some. But that will be hard for intermediate and advanced lifters, and bodybuilders will probably lose some muscle mass, so that when you've got that cushion for the 6-week period where you can't do formal exercise, and you will probably lose some muscle mass. But the same principles apply. Breathe out, blow before you go. Don't go to failure, which bodybuilders sometimes do. And before I forget, the other major consideration that you might not have thought of, in addition to that first trimester shitstorm, might also be that your recovery during pregnancy might not be what you're used to prior to pregnancy. This is something that I've certainly found for myself, and I've found with other trainees, is that you get more sore. You get more sore from less work. You get tired more quickly in your workouts, and you just can't recover. You just cannot recover from the same volume. Obviously, this isn't necessarily a blanket rule. Some women might find that that doesn't happen. So if that's you, cool, like go for it. But there are a lot of other metabolic processes going on at the moment that are distracting from your recovery from working out. So you probably, if you find that this is true for you, you're not weird, you're not doing anything wrong. You just need to listen to your body and just like reel back a little bit. It's all good. It's totally normal. Finally, before I sign off, I just want to talk about CrossFit. And there's a lot going on in CrossFit, and I've addressed it in a different video, and I'm going to make other videos on it. But when it comes to, part of CrossFit is lifting heavy weights. And so when it comes to the so I'm just going to touch on the heavyweight side of CrossFit, because there are, and the other elements I'll talk about in another thing, in another video. But the heavyweight side of it just is the same. If you're programmed to do 5 sets of 2 in your back squat today, just do like 3 sets of 10, or like as heavy as you can go with blow before you go, or 5 sets of 5. Like, I wouldn't recommend doing the 2s. Like, don't not do the workout that's prescribed to you by your box. Just modify it to be more pregnancy friendly, and you'll probably get way more out of it. See how heavy you can go with blow before you go, and feel comfortable for like 5 reps. There are ways you can play around it, and all of the principles that I talked about before apply here. And then in the Metcons, again, paying attention to your breath. Are you holding your breath? Because if you are, it's too heavy, or you're working too hard, your heart rate's too high. So if you can't breathe out through every single one of your reps, take some weight off. Like, you can still do the exact same thing. Like, if you're used to doing 40 kilo power cleans in a Metcon, just like, maybe that would be too heavy right now, and you need to do 20 kilos just with an empty bar. Or if you're used to doing, goblet squats with like 30 kilos, whatever, in a Metcon, maybe you just need to do air squats now. Like, maybe half the weight, like whatever, but like modify it to you. It's going to be different for each woman, but use those guidelines of blow before you go and leaving a couple in the tank, and that will give you your appropriate weight for the given rep range. It's a pretty solid guideline that allows you to find the right weight for you at this point in your pregnancy for this specific rep range, rather than giving any hard and fast rules. If you can breathe air out through the rep, it's not that heavy, it's a moderate weight. So I want to encourage you to feel comfortable doing that, even though other people will tell you that you're lifting too much. But again, if you were back squatting 100 kilos, 50 kilos might be a very reasonable weight for you to be back squatting right now. Whereas for other people, that would seem insane that a pregnant woman would be doing that. Most women will find that they can't do anywhere near what they would like to do, and they just need to like let it go, let the weights come down, not stress about it. Squat on an empty bar, just air squat, whatever. I just want to keep myself safe. I don't want to cause any damage to my pelvic floor or my abdominal muscles. This is keeping me strong and fit and healthy and mobile. And postpartum, I'll get back into it. So there's some concrete guidelines for how to lift and how much to lift. There's some considerations that you might not have thought of. I've tried to apply it to powerlifting, bodybuilding, and CrossFit. And finally, just a little bit of mindset advice on the whole topic. This was a really long video, so if you're still with me, I really appreciate it. But it's a complicated topic. If you have anything to add, if you disagree, if you strongly agree with anything, please write it in the comments below. If you feel like this video could benefit anyone that you know, if you know a pregnant woman who could benefit from this information, please send it to her so that she can have this info too. And finally, if you enjoyed this video and you want to know more about this topic, please subscribe to my page. That would really help me out as well. So thanks for listening, and see you next time.